Hello again, friends. And Shawn, I'll probably call on you a couple of times here in the course of this lesson. Let me share a screen. We're going to learn the Greek language today. Deaths and resurrections. 4 words we're looking at. Anastasис. See the thing that looks like a V? That's a new. That is an N sound. Ana. This thing that looks like an O with a cap on it, that's an S. Sigma. And this one in the end, it looks like an S. It is also an S, but that figure is only used on the end of words. So Anastasис, which means literally upstand. Upstand. It's got a preposition to start. Ana, or above, up or above. And the second word that is translated resurrection. And as far as I know, only one time in the scripture is X. That curly Q serpent there is an X sound. Xi is the name of it. Then Ana, then Stasis. Again, literally, it means out, up, stand. It's got 2 different prepositions in the beginning. Prepositions, of course, I believe that's who, how, when, why, where, and etc. The Bibles, with the exception of one that we found, translate both of these as resurrection. However, they are different words. And if this is the only time that exanastasiis in the entire New Testament is used in Philippians 3, then we've got to think that it means something else.
Jackson, can I cut in?
That's exactly what I was going to do. Have you come on and tell us a little about it?
There's actually, double check me real quick to make sure I'm not mistaken, but it does appear again in one other place. It appears in Luke.
Seriously?
Luke 20:35.
Oh, yeah. Let me write this down.
Let me that's in my notes. So let me just double check because I don't want to be wrong on this.
All right. When I looked it up, I looked up occurrences. And it said that this was the only occurrence. However, we've learned better than that a lot of times when we tried to track down words and found out that the internet was a little bit off. Luke 20:35?
I believe it's in Luke 20:30. Yep, Luke 20:35. It says, but in the King James, but they which shall be accounted worthy to obtain that age, world, and the resurrection from the dead. I think that's the same exanastasiis right there. For resurrection, pretty sure. I might be wrong, but
okay. Let me put that down. I'll check it later.
I'm on my wife's laptop, so I don't have my Bible program to look at the Greek.
Okay. You might even say this might be Anastasис X. They put the prepositions in the beginning, but not in the end. The end is saved for case, etc. So it could be upstand or resurrect out. Could speak of death. 2 words for death in this section. This is thanatos. This fancy O with a bar in it. That is a theta, and it takes the sound of th sound, thanatos. That is a major word in the scripture for death. In the passage we're going to look at, there's another word translated death in there. In the next verse, I think, verses 10 and 11, you find these 2 words, and that's nekros. That's not right. I made a mistake. There we go. Necros. I probably did it all the way through, which also means death. It seems like there's an obvious reason that Anastasис is teamed up with Thanatos in, I believe, verse 10. And exanastasis is teamed up with Necros in the next verse 11.
Do you have a thought on that? Have you thought about why that is? Okay, cool.
I do. And that's what I want to look at. I did come to some conclusions, but they're not solid. I need you guys to put this in your thinking cap for a while and see what you can come up with. But we'll start here, Philippians 3:7. In the red, that's my version. But what things were gainful to me, I considered loss on account of Messiah. Also, I count all as loss because of the exceeding knowledge of Messiah Yeshua, my master, through whom I have lost all those things and consider them to be shit. Skubala, it's a vulgar term. It brings the same response today as skubala did then. And usually they say dung or something like that. So we're considering here that Paul is very exclamatory about this. Something's going on in his emotions that make him want to use a vulgar word. But all this so I might gain Messiah and be found in him, not having my own righteousness out of the law, that through trust from Messiah or in Messiah, a righteousness out of Elohim based on trust. A trust based on trust. Same word there each time, pistis, translated faith.
Trusting faithfulness, right, brother?
That's very good, yeah. Trusting faithfulness, good. I must make another note of that.
Like an action type thing.
Mm-hmm. So to know him and the power of his resurrection, Anastasis, and the fellowship of his sufferings, conform to him in his death, Thanatos. If by some means I may obtain into the out resurrection, the one out of the dead, necron. There's two outs here. The X before the word resurrection, ex anastasis, and then the one, and then another ek, out. The one out of the dead. And you can see that when we're talking about death here, we're talking about two different things too. Maybe.
I believe we are.
Okay. I can't wait to get to my conclusion so you can get to yours. Here's an important note on Strong's. To look up words like these in Strong's, it's worthless. Strong's is a concordance of the King James Version. It only shows you where the word is in the KJV and how in the KJV it's there defined. So you see, like, you will get no place using Strong's to find definitions. You need a lexicon like Thayer's or Vine's or something like that. They're very cheap if you want to buy one. Strong's is not a lexicon where one finds definitions. Don't ever use Strong's for definitions. Off the track, you will go every time until the next thing you know, You join the hard shell Baptists and won't even know it. You just find yourself there teaching the children's Sunday school class. A little tip. Here's some deductions. We've already talked a couple of times about the Anastasis and the exanastasis. But then there are two deaths, as I pointed out, Thanatos and Nekros. I was surprised to see that Nekros is used quite often in the Bible for dead or death. But by and large, Thanatos is, and I believe there's a reason for that. Maybe I found it. The Anastasis are upstanding. The resurrection one speaks of Messiah's Thanatos. The exanastasius, or outstanding, speaks of Nekros. So it looks pretty obvious that Paul is matching these words up. Anastasis with Thanatos and exanastasis with Nekros. Was that pretty clear? Okay.
Yep.
I was thinking, oftentimes, I think of English words that have come from Greek words. And one that crossed my mind is necrosis, which is the death of body tissue by definition. It occurs when too little blood flows in the tissue. This can be from an injury, radiation, being out in the cold, or chemicals. The skin is dead. The body tissue has died. Necrosis can't be reversed. When large areas of tissues die due to the lack of blood supply, the condition is called gangrene. So this seems to me, if there was a difference between these words necros and thanatos, a necros might be a rotting away. And once again, I bring up the idea that when Mary Magdalene saw Yeshua coming out of the tomb, I believe that when he said, I have to go up to my father, he was talking about showing his skin to the priest because he had been dead. And he's going to show himself alive and his skin to the priest so that the priest can pardon his sin, whatever it was, if any, that he wasn't gangrenous, prove that he wasn't gangrenous. So I'm figuring if you can identify the deaths, then maybe you can identify the resurrections. So a kind of resurrection is paired with a kind of death. Just an observation from Philippians, again, 13, verses 10 and 11, which I'm going to repeat here. Maybe you can get a better feel with how and why they might be teamed up, because I think we're looking for an answer that we can't really find in lexicons. We just have to find it in the heart of the Spirit. The power of his, Yahshua's resurrection, conformed to him in his death, thanatos. Yahshua, he died. He's calling Yahshua's death thanatos. For Yahshua's body didn't rot. It wasn't necrotic. Else he would have ended up in a leper colony. And he had to show his skin to the high priest to complete the prophetic fulfillment. All righteousness, as he says. Therefore, the anastasis may have to do with a clean resurrection. And maybe that's what the writer is focusing the verse on. Understand that this might be completely the opposite here. But I figure Yahshua said that the elect never die at all. John 5:24. Truly, truly, I say to you, he who hears my word and believes him who sent me has life haolam va'ed. He doesn't come into judgment, but is passed from death to life. And the word Yahshua uses in John 5 for death is thanatos, which would match up with our Philippians 3:10, the death that frees the living human spirit, if that spirit hears the word of Elohim and believes in Yahshua, or maybe not. Then we have the second one, the out-resurrection from the dead. When people die, they naturally rot away. We're rotting away right now. We are necrotic right now, to some extent. They're laid out in stone until the bones are clean, maybe a year. They're just laid out on a stone table in a cave. This is the way most of them did in the first century. They didn't do this in the century before or the century after, just the first century. They put them on a refrigerium, a stone table inside a tomb or a cave. And they let them rot until there's hardly anything left on them. However, and there are different accounts of how long this is to be, and that is that people are allowed to come in to the refrigerium and sit down and eat dinner with the deceased. One source said up to 70 days. Imagine that. Another one says 7 days, which is more likely. Or such dead rot away while alive, and they would often live where everything was rotting away. And where was the leper colony? Or it's hard to call it leprosy because there are all kinds of skin diseases. But they all went to the same place in Gehenna, the burning Jerusalem trash heap on the south side of Jerusalem. Ever burning. This is what Isaiah is talking about in his last chapter, speaking of the worms and the flames. He's talking about Gehenna. So my guess was, what should we do? Acquire a modern, up-to-date Koine Greek lexicon and look up all 4 words for nuances of meaning. And unfortunately, my books, if I even have a lexicon left, I've been selling them off the last 3 years. They would be in my storage. I didn't have one here. And I couldn't find anything satisfactory. And now that I've gone through this, I'm a little confused, maybe because of my condition right now, about which is which. So what I want to ask you to do, you guys, you are... you have great powers of deduction. That's something I've learned about you folks here today. Great powers of deduction. I'd like to start with Shawn. And here, I think I already tipped you off to this. And hear what's going through your mind on this. Help me out.
Okay, brother. I'll go as far as I can go with it so far.
All right, good.
I agree, and I noticed the same 2 things you did as far as the pairings of the out resurrection and the second word for death. I think my thoughts on it, to put it very simply, is Paul is speaking of the death that everybody falls on, and Yeshua did too. I believe that when he uses the same general word for resurrection as the last day resurrection, that everybody all the dead will be raised. But the reason why he did that, I think, is because Yeshua also fulfilled the first fruits. And I think that he is the first fruits of the general resurrection. because the general resurrection is going to be the one that is.
Hold on a minute. Let me shut somebody down. Still didn't get him. Okay, sorry.
No, that's okay. So I think that the Yeshua was the first fruits of the general resurrection. Going down to that, to me, that's what verse 10 is saying. To verse 11, when he says, if by any means, I just wanted to I just want to read one more thing. In Acts 27:12, the same phrase appears and it shows that it is something that isn't for sure, but it's something that is conditional. He's talking about when Paul's on the ship and he says, in the harbor being incommodious to winter in, the more part advised to put to sea from thence, if by any means they might be able to attempt to reach Phoenix to winter, which was a harbor farther on. So it's something that is definitely uncertain, and it's something that Paul's striving for. So perhaps, if by any means, perhaps by any way, I may advance, and I'm reading out of the Rotherham's here. This is very interesting though. I may advance to the earlier resurrection, which is from among the dead.
Which again, resurrection is that? Anastasi's?
Yes, this is exanastasi's.
Oh, okay.
This is exanastasi's. And then in his footnote, he says literally in quotation marks, the out resurrection. And it occurs twice, out from among the dead. The out resurrection, the one is out from among the dead, out from among the necrosis. So to me, that is talking about a separate, different resurrection. Otherwise, why would it not use the same words? Why is there a difference? And like you said, it only appears here, but it does appear in Luke 20:35. And
what were you just reading from Paul?
I was reading the Rotherham's. That was chapter. Yes.
Do you know chapter verse?
Chapter 3, verses 10 and 11.
Acts?
No, Philippians. Oh, the Acts reference. I'm sorry, Acts 27:12.
Okay.
Acts 27:12. That and that shows that if by any means phrase in the Greek, it's the same there, and it shows that it's used as a, if somehow we might attain there. It's not like a guaranteed thing, but it's something. Mm-hmm. But then if in Luke 20:35, I really feel that's a strong connection because it's out of the mouth of Yeshua, and it is Matthew. Hold on, let me go over there. I didn't have a bookmarked in my Bible. 20:35. And again, I'm using the Rotherham's here, so if it's a little bit difficult to understand, just try to bear with me. Luke 20:35. That they who have been accounted worthy that age to obtain, and the resurrection that is from among the dead. That is exanastasi's right there.
And what's dead?
Dead, I don't know, brother.
Okay.
I didn't check dead, but the resurrection is the exanastasi's.
Okay.
So then he says they neither marry nor give marry. They can't die because then they're like the messengers, and they are the sons of God. So that in mind, I think that there is I think what Paul is describing is the same thing that the Nazarene Acts and all the other literature we have about the narrow road, the two paths. I think that the narrow road, I think there's a difference in living within the kingdom and reigning within the kingdom. I think living is I think it's all free gift. It's all God's grace. Don't get me wrong. But I think that it all involves levels of righteousness. I think that people that enter into the blood covenant with the Messiah, and we are redeemed, and you're truly born again of spirit, then I believe that you are part of the redeemed and you live within the land. You have a portion within the kingdom of Yahweh. But I think that those that walk of overcoming faith, like the book of Revelation, all the churches, them that overcome it, they overcome by the blood of the Lamb, by the word of the testimony, and by not loving their lives unto death, and that I think is overcoming faith. And that I think is the resurrection that Paul is striving for, because if you read his Corinthians references to it as well, he talks about, he puts it in the text or in the terms of the Roman Olympiad, running the race to stretch at the end, reach the tape, and then be crowned with the corruptible wreath around your head, but he's talking about running the race to obtain the incorruptible at the end. And like he said, many run the race, but only one reach the end. So I think that's what he's striving for. And I think these words, when we're careful, and we can actually kind of, you know, we don't just believe that once you're redeemed, you have blood insurance, you know, and you just live your life and then you're redeemed. And we know that that's not how faith works. That's why the word faith really is trusting faithfulness. It implies working, like even in Ephesians, when Paul says, "For by grace are you saved through faith, and not of yourselves. It is a gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast." And then people stop, especially people that hate Paul, and they say, "See," then they jump right to James, and then they compare the two. But look, read verse 10. In fact, we are his workmanship, created in Messiah Yeshua upon a footing of good works, which Elohim prepared beforehand that therein we might walk, or works that Yahweh before ordained that we should walk in. The only works he ever before ordained that his people should walk in is his Torah. So I think that's what Paul's talking about, overcoming faith. That's kind of what I think, brother. And as far and the reason why those two words are matched, I think, is because one is speaking of the resurrection of the dead, in which Messiah was the first fruits. I think the second time Paul is speaking of that overcoming resurrection that occurs whenever, you know, maybe it's occurred. I personally believe it's occurred many times. I think at the end of each age, however that's marked out, there are overcoming people, like the middle, and we know between AD, say 200 up until, say, even the 1700s, we know the horrific things. I mean, read Fox's Book of Martyrs, and just to get an idea, but I mean, it's horrific. But these people, I believe, had overcoming faith, and they had that earlier resurrection, if we're even interpreting all this correctly. So that's as far as I can go, brother. But I noticed the same thing you do, but I wish I would have looked up that word for dead in Luke. I didn't look that up.
Well, we can save that till next Tuesday, because I think that you have found something here that not only needs the investigation of thinking believers like us, but something that ought to be taught, if we find it to be true, to every believer everywhere about the resurrection. And I agree with you. I always thought of circles of holiness, or what do you call it when the moon revolves around the earth? Circles of holiness, like planets. The closer you get to the inside, the more righteous you may be. So I told somebody the other day, just regarding their veganism, that you're probably on a closer circle than I am, because I do eat meat, and I believe that not eating meat is not orbit. Thank you. Not eating meat, there's certainly no violation if you eat meat. But I think if somebody wants to dedicate meat eating to Elohim for whatever reason, I think that would be adjudged as another step in that holiness. So, this is a wonderful find. You're a really fine exegete. I wish that you could start learning New Testament Greek, because that's where you belong, my friend. Excellent. Would you like to summarize that? Can you summarize that in maybe 2 sentences?
I believe there are 2 resurrections, a general resurrection at the end of days for everybody, and an earlier resurrection for those that walk in overcoming faith and walk the narrow path as the Messiah taught.
Okay, very good. There are some chats here we'll look at. All right. The etymology of gangrene derives from the Latin word gangrena. Gangrena. The A and the E together in Latin gives you the I sound. And from the Greek, gangrena, which means putrefaction of tissues. It doesn't necessarily mean death at all. But it could result in death. Yes, that helps. Thank you, Steve. The sign of leprosy is told to John the Baptist, exactly. Steve continues, because the haven was not suitable to winter in, the majority advised going to sea from there, if by any means they could reach Phoenix and winter there, which is a port of Crete, looking southwest and northwest. By the way, somebody found a piece off Paul's shipwreck about 10 years ago. I just read a book about it in the last year. It's exciting. Off the coast of Malta. I can't call his name right now. I just don't remember those things. And is that, that, Steve, is what Shawn was talking about earlier on when he was quoting Acts. But where does the Melchizedek priesthood come in? How does that work, Vicki?
I was referring to something that Shawn had said, and he said about Paul winning the race versus all of those. There are a lot of people that are running the race, and only one can win the race. So
I don't know of many people that are thinking of their life as that.
That's what I was referring to.
Well, I think Paul's disposition is such that that's what he would probably think. And then, like the Didache says, if we can walk as the Messiah did, we are blessed. If not, do the best we can. Thank you. See what else here.
Yeah, that was illustrating that phrase, if by any means, showing that it was conditional, not certainly.
So if there are no more comments about this, next Tuesday we take this up again once we have time to get back into the original language again and see how these new passages that you mentioned, how they compare to the ones we found in Philippians. I'm really excited about this. I haven't really had a big discovery here lately, and I'm glad to be in on this one. I'm working through those Adamic race videos I did a few years ago, and I want to get those back up because that relates to this too. I should say, this relates to following the Adamic race.
That is why I'm so excited for you to do that, brother, because I was thinking that same thing. When I first heard that, you were talking from John 3 about being born of spirit, and then that opened up, that got me thinking about a lot of stuff, and this is including in one of them.
Well, yeah, especially what comes to my mind again is the thought of unspiritual or non-spiritual humans. And yeah, two of these that I just finished up editing, they deal with that. And as I listened through again, it just reinforced my belief that that's the way it is. Another thing that should be known in every Sunday school class in the world, I think. So I'm excited. How about you all?
Most definitely. I'm going to be looking at it close. It'll be the first time I've ever really looked at it. So I'm excited to research it out and see how it goes.
Okay, brothers and sisters, I'm going to go now. I'm shaky tonight. But if you want to continue on, let me know and I'll keep the thing going.
Oh, I'm good, brother. That's a good start. I have some stuff I want to look at now anyways and do some research.
Sis, brothers, thank you for coming out tonight. Appreciate it. Yeah, we're excited. We're excited. The sad thing is that we can't get together any other way than this, at least not until Sukkot comes.